Shalom, holy initiates and holy adepts. In this video, I'm going to go very deep into the holy divine well. So deep that I have to list a few prerequisites for this video. In order to fully comprehend this video, it is requisite that you watch, at the very least, my video entitled The Holographic Universe. And most definitely, it is a prerequisite that you have seen my series on Adam Kadmon, my series on Lilith, and just as important, my video entitled The Lessening of the Moon. It is definitely a prerequisite that you have seen these videos given here in order to fully comprehend the knowledge and wisdom that will be revealed in this video, which is very deep, very advanced esoteric knowledge, no question about it. So before I begin, I was having a bit of trouble as to what to title this video, because essentially the core of this video has to do with illuminating a very esoteric construct that the Holy Word utilizes. So as I've stated in some of my previous videos, I'm sure you holy initiates and adepts understand that the Holy Word is essentially a divine code. And this divine code has many layers or many levels of encryption. And the Holy Word utilizes is many constructs in order to encrypt the Holy Word. So essentially the Holy Word utilizes as many different constructs and methods for the purposes of encoding and encrypting the Holy Word, okay? And you have to be initiated into the holy mysteries in order to gain a knowledge of the arcane methods and constructs that the Holy Word is employing to encrypt the underlying text, okay? And this all has to do with very ancient veracious exegesis, because exegesis is a very comprehensive branch of the Holy Word. And there are correct and veracious methods to properly interpret the Holy Scriptures. And these methods, some of these methods are exoteric and some of them are esoteric, and all of them were given to the Sanhedrin, or the sages and elders of Israel, during the generation of Moshe, okay? And it is only us Kabbalists that have a full understanding of both the exoteric and esoteric methods and constructs of the Holy Word in order to properly, fully interpret the Holy Word, okay? Whether you're doing it exoterically or esoterically, okay? And so essentially in this video, what I'm doing is I'm going to reveal one such very esoteric construct that the Holy Word utilizes in order to encrypt the holy mysteries. And in demonstrating or illuminating or unveiling this construct, I'm going to do so with respect to the great holy mystery of Mashiach and Lucifer. In other words, I'm going to illuminate this very esoteric construct in light of a revelation of Lucifer and Mashiach. Okay, now before I begin the actual unveiling of this construct, I have to go through a few introductory points, okay, which will lead up to the revelation. Okay, so the first critical Kabbalistic point here to understand is one such example of the polysemity of the Hebrew language, right? So as an example, as it pertains to this teaching, the Hebrew word for river is nahar, okay? But in Aramaic, nahar signifies light, okay? And this thus gives us a very important or critical mystical equation in Qabbalah. Essentially what it tells us is that rivers mystically signify also lights in the Holy Word. We have this very mystical equation that is given to us, in the ancient Chaldaic language. Okay, vis-a-vis the relationship between Hebrew and the Aramaic. In this case, with respect to the word nahar. Okay, so with this understanding, we may also add the additional understanding that as Kabbalists, we know and understand that Elohim are also lights. Okay, lights, lights may signify Elohim, because we understand that, many of the Elohim are understood to be lights. Okay, this is why we read in the New Testament in First Yochanan in chapter 1 verse 5. You have this very great Kabbalist here, Jewish Kabbalist here, stating, "This is the message that we have heard of him and declare unto ye, Elohim is light." Right? Understand that Yochanan is a highly initiated Jewish Kabbalist. He understands, the keys to the kingdom of Elohim. He understands all of the code words in Qabbalah. He knows that there's this mystical equation between Elohim and lights. And now I have revealed to you also that lights are there's also additionally a mystical equation between lights and rivers. And so through the transitive property of logic, we may thus equate Elohim with rivers, meaning that rivers, are also arcane symbols that may signify Elohim or different divinities or gods for that matter. Okay, so keep this very important, arcane Kabbalistic, knowledge in mind as we proceed here, because it will be very important. So now we're going to go to the second point, and this point is even more important and greater in understanding, which alludes to a very, very esoteric construct in the Holy Word. Okay, so what is this esoteric construct that I'm now going to illuminate and reveal? Well, it's a little hard to explain, so I'm going to try to do my best here to explain it, but once I'm done, you should be able to see what this esoteric construct is. Okay, we begin in Sefer Yechezkel in chapter 1 verse 1, where the verse states, "Now it came to pass," and then it continues, "upon the river Kibar." So here we have Yechezkel, the holy prophet, giving us some dates and telling us on this certain date, I just happened to be upon a certain river, and it gives us the name of this river, which is Kibar. Okay, now duly note that Hebrew word that I have there, which is the name of the river, which is Kibar, right? So the underlying Hebrew there for the river Kibar is, read from right to left, is Nahar Kibar. Nahar is Hebrew for river, and then we have the Hebrew name of that river, which is Kibar. Okay, so duly note additionally how the name Kibar is spelled, because if you go to the bottom of the slide, I have there the spelling for the Hebrew word for cherub, and if you can see here, you can see that these two words are practically spelled exactly the same, the only difference being in a vowel, which is the letter Waw. So essentially, Kabbalistically here, these two words are spelled the same exact way. They utilize the same letters. It's just the arrangement of the letters differs. Okay, right? The name of the river, which is Kibar, is spelled Chaf Beth Resh, but Cherub is spelled Kaf Resh Wab Beth. Okay, so in other words, the Hebrew word for Cherub is really just a permutation of the Hebrew name for that river, which is Kibar. Okay, so what's going on here Kabbalistically? What is, you have to understand that when you start going into the Hebrew text becomes alive, and it starts to mystically point and allude to very esoteric divine revelations. Okay, so it's essentially here we have in the first verse a river which we know can also signify light, which is equated with divinity. And we have the name of the river being Kabar, which is a permutation of a divine entity, which is called a cherub, right? So essentially, the book of Yechezkel begins with a river called Kabar, and then further on it goes to talk about it goes further on in describing these divine entities that are known as cherubim. So notice the play, the Hebrew word here, what's going on in the underlying Hebrew is all mystically alluding and tying in everything that's going on in this very mystical book. So you have this relation then between Nahar, which is river or a light or divinity, and these divine entities, which are called cherubim. So essentially, the river Chebar, Kabbalistically, we should then understand, represents these divine entities that are called cherubim. Now, this is essentially the essence of this esoteric construct. Okay, this is a perfect example of the Holy Word utilizing this very esoteric construct in encrypting this great holy mystery, right? What is this esoteric construct? The esoteric construct is that it begins by describing the name of a certain river, okay, which we should know Kabbalistically represents some sort of divinity, okay, and then after it reveals the name of a certain river, okay, it then proceeds by actually describing the divinity and the name of the divinity that is represented by the river. Okay, having a little trouble here, trying to fully explicate this esoteric construct, but I'm hoping by now at this point that ye listeners are probably seeing how all of this is interconnected and are hopefully understanding this very powerful esoteric construct. Okay, so this is very important as we're going to continue here. Okay, so moving now to elucidate a great mystery dealing with the angel that Yaakov wrestled with, right? So we have this very great mystery that is presented to us in the Torah, where we read about Yaakov wrestling with an angel, or a man who's really an angel. And there are many Christians who have the very advanced, correct understanding that this angel represents Mashiach in a angelic state, even possibly in a human state, right? Because it describes him as a man. So this angel is a shapeshifter. He can shapeshift between angel and man. The point is, the Christians have the correct advanced understanding that on one level this angel represents Mashiach. But if I go to any Christian and I ask him, I need the scriptural seals and proofs from the scriptures that indeed this this divine being is Mashiach, most of them, if not all of them, cannot prove it to me. They cannot give me the scriptural seals and proofs. Okay, and it's very lamentable. Again, they can't do it because they're not fully initiated into the holy mysteries and into our arcane and into the arcane methods and constructs of Qabbalah. Okay, but here I'm going to give you the proof. So this is where the actual illumination of this very powerful esoteric construct that I want to illuminate here is going to begin. Okay, and essentially this arcane construct that I'm going to unveil has to do with the shape-shifting essence of the Holy Word and its verses. Okay, and so essentially, the verses here that deal with Yaakov wrestling with Mashiach have 7 levels of interpretation, as I have stated many times. Right, there are 7 levels, to the Hebrew language. Right, the first level is the most literal level, and as we descend down into further levels, when we reach the 7th level, we then arrive at the most esoteric and most mystical interpretation, of the verse or the text. Okay, so this parable here of Yaakov wrestling with this divine being has 7 levels of interpretations. Okay, and this arcane construct is going to be illuminated through the 6th and 7th level of interpretation of this parable. Okay, I'm going to begin here with the seventh level of interpretation, which is the most esoteric and most mystical interpretation. And then after this, I will proceed into the sixth level. Okay. So first, we're going to start at the seventh level. Okay. On the seventh level of interpretation, which is the most advanced and esoteric interpretation, is that this divine being essentially represents Mashiach. It's a very great Kabbalistic mystery that's not even fully understood by most Christians. They have only been introduced to it in the most basic understanding of it, which is that this divine being is Mashiach. But it goes much deeper than that, okay? So here I'm going to actually give you the scriptural seals and proofs, which practically no Christian has really ever revealed as far as I'm aware of, okay? So we begin by reading Sefer Bereshith, chapter 32, verse 22, where the verse states, and he, Yaakov, passed over the ford, Yabok, okay? The first critical point to understand is that, again, we have a river or a stream that is being spoken of here, because in verse 23, this ford is also referred to as a wadi, or essentially a stream or a river, okay? Again, from Qabbalah, we need to understand that rivers are occult symbols that represent divinities, okay? And again, the name of this wadi is Yabok. Duly note how it appears in the Hebrew there and how it is spelled, okay? Because in Hebrew, the name of Yaakov is spelled as you see here on the slide. And again, you can see the similarity between the spelling of the name of Yaakov and the actual ford. Phonetically, they're very similar, right? You have Yabok, Yaakov. Phonetically, they're very similar, okay? And the only difference really here, again, being in a vowel, which is the letter Ain, which usually is a vowel, okay? So just like we had in the previous slide, where you have, you know, the name of the river, which is Kibar, is very phonetically similar also to the name of the divinity, which is Karub, okay? So here, this is telling us, we have a very mystical equation telling us that the verse is preparing us, right? The verse is preparing us, letting us to know that after it tells us the name of this divinity, which is Yabok, it's essentially a preparatory verse saying, get ready, because the ensuing verses are going to speak about this divinity. And it gives us the name of the divinity, right? In the previous slide, the first verse begins with the name of the river, which is a preparatory verse telling us, hey, get ready, the ensuing verses are going to talk about this divinity, which is known as a cherub. Likewise here, this is a preparatory verse saying, hey, get ready, the ensuing verses are going to talk about this divinity who is called Yaakov, because Yaakov is a divine figure, as I have already proven in a previous video. Okay, so essentially then, on another mystical level, what we have here is that Yaakov is wrestling against himself. The fact that the name of the river is called Yabok, which is really the same name for all intents and purposes of Yaakov, and Yaakov is wrestling with this divinity, which is represented by the river, tells us that mystically Yaakov is wrestling against himself. Now, on one level, this may be confusing if you haven't been fully initiated. I mean, what does this mean that he's wrestling against himself? How can he wrestle against himself? This is very esoteric, very mystical. Allow me to elaborate further here. Okay, this goes back to the understanding that principally there is a binary aspect to existence, right? Principally, we may say that our existence is binary, meaning that we are comprised of two existences or images, right? This goes back to a very great, profound arcane noom revealed in Sefer Tikkun HaZohar Tikkun 22 in folio 65a, which I have discussed in a previous video. Okay, but I'm going to repeat this here, just for the purposes of this teaching, which essentially the folio states, quoting Shir HaShirim chapter 8 verse 6, which is set me like a seal. The text goes on to state, this is the neshama, its engraved impression is above, like they explain about Yaakov. And the image of Yaakov was engraved in the throne of glory. Again, they're quoting Talmud Bavli Tractate Chulin 91b. All neshamot are hewn from there. Their engraving is engraved above. Their impression or stamp is below. meaning that principally there are two images. This is why in Sefer Bereshith, chapter 1, verse 27, the word image is repeated twice, which is a mystical allusion and indicator to the binary aspect of our existence, meaning that we have an image above and an image below. Okay, it's like when if you've seen the movie The Matrix, right? You know, they have their image, which is in Zion, and then there's their image, which is in the Matrix, right? It's like a virtual, reality, essentially. That's how we can think of our existence. Our archetypal seal, our archetypal image is in the heavens, while our lower image is here on earth. Okay, you can think about it as a person who's playing a video game, right? The person playing the video game is the archetype, and the image that he assumes in the video game is an image of him, right? Which is a lower image. It's kind of like that. So essentially, that's what's going on here. Okay, the divine entity that Yaakov is wrestling with is his supernal archetypal seal. Okay, so you have essentially the parable. It basically represents a wrestling match between the impression or the stamp, which is here on earth, which is Yaakov, who is wrestling with his supernal archetypal engraving or seal, which is his supernal image, which is in heaven, which at this point has descended down to earth, and now they are wrestling. Okay, so essentially this is what's really going on. Okay, and this is all a reflection of one of our most ancient, famous esoteric maxims, which is as above, so below. Right? This is why we read in Sefer Tikkunei HaZohar in Tikkun 20/21 in folio 48a, it states Yaakov who was above and the image of Yaakov below, because they understand that there is this very crucial binary aspect to our existence. Right? We have an image in heaven, and then we have an image below here on earth. We can think of our existence here on earth as being the video game, and we can think of the heavens as being, where the real people are. So you can think of yourself as you're truly up in heaven, and you're playing this video game that is really earth, and you have this image, that you're playing with here on earth. Okay, it's kind of like that if I'm explaining it correctly here, but hopefully you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. So this is also why we read in Tikkun 13 in folio 29a, it states, and Yaakov is certainly in the image of the middle pillar. So we know from Qabbalah, en passing, in our Kabbalistic text, there's this strong equation between Yaakov and the middle pillar, because essentially Yaakov represents the entire middle pillar of the Sferoth. Okay? And we also read in Tikkun 19 in folio 44 and 40b, it states, the middle pillar is called the son of Yah. So en passing, in our Kabbalistic text, we find another equation which equates the middle pillar with the son of Yah, or the son of God. Okay, so we need to understand that upper Yaakov is essentially the middle pillar within the Sferoth, which is the son of Yah, and lower Yaakov. I have an error here on the slide. You can see on the slide it says upper Yaakov is the image of the middle pillar, etc. Actually, that should really state lower Yaakov. So that's actually an error. I apologize for that. But essentially, lower Yaakov represents the image of the middle pillar, who is Metatron, who is Adam Kadmon, who is Mashiach, who is the son of Ha-Elohim. You need to understand Kabbalistically that there is a very, very crucial difference between the son of Yah and the son of Ha-Elohim. As I've stated in some of my other videos, there is what we call the son within the Godhead, and then there's the son outside of the Godhead. Okay, and the son outside of the Godhead is an image of the son within the Godhead. So upper Yaakov represents the son of Yah, and lower Yaakov represents the son of Ha-Elohim. Okay, and so lower Yaakov on another level also represents the actual physical incarnation of lower Yaakov. Okay, so what we have in here is this very deep Kabbalistic parable, essentially revealing this wrestling match between the incarnation of lower Yaakov, which is represented by Yaakov here on earth, and upper Yaakov, which is his archetypal existence in heaven. Okay, and so this is the core and seal of the scriptural and Kabbalistic proof that indeed this angel Phanuel is Mashiach. Now, Yaakov in the text calls the place where he wrestles with this angel Phanuel. But Kabbalistically, we also need to understand that the names of places many times are also the names of the divine entities behind those places. So Kabbalistically, we should understand that Phanuel is not just the name of the place, but more specifically is the name of the divine entity that Yaakov is wrestling with. Okay, it's just one of his many names and titles, because you have to also understand that divine entities have many titles and many names, right? Mashiach has many titles, right? He's referred to as Metatron, as Adam Kadmon, as Phanuel, as Yaakov, many titles, many names, okay? So essentially, what has been revealed here, which is a very complex, very esoteric holy mystery, is essentially the essence of what's going on here. This is the scriptural seal. These are the scriptural seals and proofs that this divine entity is Mashiach. Now, remember, this is level 6. What I have just revealed here is level 6 of the underlying text. Okay, so keep this in mind, because now I'm going to proceed to illuminate level 7. Oh, my mistake. I meant to say this is level 7. Sorry. What has just been revealed here is actually level 7. We're on level 7 of interpretation of the underlying text. Okay, but now I'm going to proceed and reveal level 6. Okay, so level 6 is the revelation that Phanuel is actually Samael. Okay, we read in Midrash Rabbah to Bereshith in chapter 77, verse 3. It states, and this verse from the ancient Midrashim is actually commenting on the verses that deal with Yaakov wrestling with this divine entity. So it begins by stating, Rab Chama bar Chanina said, he was the prince, or the Arcane of Esau, which is essentially Lucifer. There is a parable about an athlete that got up and wrestled with the son of the king. Now, here, the sages that are discoursing here in these ancient Midrashim, again, as I've said in other videos, these Rabbanim are highly initiated Kabbalists, okay? And I mean very highly initiated Kabbalists. These are the ancient sages. And here you have an ancient Rab who is introducing some very profound holy mysteries here. Again, he's only introducing them. He states that the divine entity who Yaakov wrestles with represents Samael, or Lucifer. Because Kabbalistically, we should know that the prince or archon of Esau is Lucifer. Esau is a divine archetype that represents Lucifer. This is just a basic tenet of Qabbalah. Okay, and so this, of course, this knowledge and wisdom is found in our ancient texts. It's not just found in the Midrashim, but it's also found in other Midrashim that I'm not quoting here, as well as in our Kabbalistic texts, which go much deeper in explaining this holy mystery, as in Sefer HaZohar. Okay, but he also reveals another very powerful holy mystery. He states there's a parable about an athlete who got up and wrestled with the son of the king. So we have these two sayings interconnected, related, right? He's telling you that this divine entity is Lucifer, and he's also telling you through the parable that he's the son of the king, meaning he's a son of Ha-Elohim. But if you watched my previous videos, you should already know this, because I have already proven from the scriptures that Mashiach and Lucifer are twin brothers. There are two Adam Kadmonim, two Adams, they're twins, okay? And they're both sons of Ha-Elohim, right? Yaakov, who represents Mashiach, and Esau, who represents Lucifer, are twin brothers, and they're both the first two sons of Ha-Elohim, or Yitzchak. This is a very, very deep, esoteric, profound mystery, holy mystery that is being revealed here. Okay, so again, we have a very mystical equation. The angel is not only Samael or Lucifer, but is also the son of Ha-Elohim. And this goes back to the great Kabbalistic mystery of the gematria of Mashiach being equal to the gematria of Nachash, which is 358. And we know that Nachash represents Lucifer, right? So this what has just been illuminated here up to this point is the revelation of this most esoteric construct of the Holy Word. On level 7, we were able to see that this divine entity represents Mashiach. But on level 6, we are able to see that this divine entity represents Samael. Why are the ancient sages equating the divine entity with Samael? Because you had to put the verses in context. What is going on here? Jacob is about to meet with his brother Esau. Okay, he's just met with Esau. He's about to meet with Esau again, right? So in context, Esau has this very strong influence, on the text, on the chapter. Okay, he's very present in context. And he's about to meet his brother Esau. So it's another representation of as above, so below, because in order to have a successful meeting with his brother Esau, who is his enemy, he must first wrestle and slay him in the supernatural, in the spiritual, in order to make sure that in the physical, his enemy Esau is subdued. As above, so below. You must first subdue the spiritual force behind its underlying force on earth. The sages understand these principles very well. And this is the understanding, this is the essential esoteric understanding behind why this divine entity represents Lucifer. Because Jacob has to wrestle and subdue the spiritual force of Esau before Esau in the physical is subdued. Okay, and so again we see by understanding level 6 and level 7 how they are mirror images of each other, right? Level 7 is Mashiach, level 6 deals with Lucifer, and we already know from Gematria that there's this mystical equation between Lucifer and Mashiach. And so what we see then is we see the shape-shifting essence and nature of these holy verses, of the holy word. Again, I cannot stress how mystical, how telestic, how esoteric what has been revealed here is. So now I'm going to give another example of this construct, right? I just demonstrated and illuminated and unveiled this very, very esoteric mystical construct with respect to the great holy mystery of Mashiach and Lucifer, specifically the parable of Jacob wrestling with this divine entity, okay? But now I'm going to give a second example of this arcane construct dealing on the same topic, but in a different parable, okay? This time we're going to go and talk about King David. Now we know we should all be, cognizant enough to understand that, King David principally represents Mashiach. I think practically every Christian and Jew knows this. And, again, in light of this, and dealing with the same, stain on this same holy subject or holy mystery of Lucifer and Mashiach, I'm going to again give you another example of this arcane construct on this same holy mystery, but with a different parable, okay, regarding King David, right? So I'm going to then soon here speak on the parable regarding King David committing adultery with Bathsheba, okay? Regarding this parable, we're going to see that level 6 deals with King David representing Mashiach, which everyone seems to know and understand. But on level 7, we're going to see how King David actually represents Lucifer. Again, revealing and demonstrating the shape-shifting nature of the Holy Word. And even more importantly, of the Son of Ha-Elohim, vis-a-vis Mashiach and Lucifer. So here we go. Level 6, which is the revelation of King David being Mashiach, right? In this case, we understand the parable as King David represents Mashiach, Bathsheba represents Shekhinah, who, by the way, is naked, just like Hawa, because the text says that she's naked, right, taking a shower. So, again, we have that equation there, interconnecting Bathsheba with Hawa, who are divine archetypes representing Shekhinah. And then we would have Uriah Hachiti representing Lucifer. Okay? Now we read in Sefer Shamuel Beth, chapter 11, verse 4, the verse states, she was purified from her impurity. Right? So on level 6, what the Kabbalists teach and explain regarding this holy mystery is that essentially what the parable is explaining is that Mashiach is taking back Shekhinah or Hawa from Lucifer after he had defiled her. Okay? So we understand as the highest holy initiates that none of our ancient patriarchs and saints ever sinned. These are just allusions to the profane and uninitiated. In other words, David did not sin. We know this very well, right? So the explanation, the reconciliation, right, through these Kabbalistic parables is that David essentially took Bathsheba prematurely, right? Understand, Lucifer raped or defiled Shekhinah, okay? And what the parable is saying is that after Lucifer had defiled her, Shekhinah had to go through a process of purification. And once she was purified, Mashiach comes in and takes her back, because rightfully she is his, okay? And so then Lucifer is killed. So Lucifer is taken down, Shekhinah is restored and purified, and is now back in being one with her husband, her rightful husband, which is Mashiach. Okay? And all the Kabbalists will add to this is that, well, the gist of it is that he took her prematurely. She wasn't yet fully right. I don't know if I buy that as a highly initiated Kabbalist, because the text tells us that she was already purified when David took her back. So that's how the most initiated Kabbalists understand the parable at level 6, which is a voracious understanding, absolutely. Okay? But now we're going to proceed to level 7. This is where it gets really interesting. In level 7, King David actually represents Lucifer. Okay? Uriah Hachiti is now switched and represents Mashiach, and Bathsheba still represents Shekhinah, right? And so now what we have is we have a continuation of another arcane construct, which is used to reveal the defilement of Shekhinah by Lucifer. So in this case, King David committing adultery with Bathsheba represents the defilement of Shekhinah by Lucifer. Now, if you've seen my video on the lesson of the moon, this other arcane construct there is fully explained and demonstrated and illuminated. Okay, if you understand that, then you can see this when we're at level 7. We're really just understanding a continuation of another arcane construct, and the continuation of further revealing this holy mystery of the defilement of Shekhinah by Lucifer. Okay, now some more scriptural seals and proofs to this understanding are found in the next chapter, in chapter 12, verse 1, regarding Nathan's parable, because in that parable, King David is equated with the rich man, and Uriah is equated with the poor man. Now, very interestingly, as I proceed here to even reveal other arcane constructs, right, we need to understand that the Hebrew word asir, which is rich, when permuted becomes seir, which is Hebrew for the provenance of Esau or Edom. Okay, so seir also means goat, and we already know from Qabbalah that seir is a code word for Lucifer. Okay, so the Hebrew word rich, when permuted, becomes essentially associated with Lucifer, telling us that there's a mystical equation between wealth and Lucifer. Okay, this is why we find that the vast majority of the most wealthiest people throughout the generations have been some of the most initiated Luciferians. Okay, Lucifer controls much of the wealth in this world, unfortunately. But that's a topic for another time. The point is that we have this Kabbalistic mystical equation equating Dawid here with Lucifer, further reinforcing the understanding, the voracious understanding for that matter. Very, very interestingly also, the Hebrew word for poor in chapter 12 verse 1 is spelled very unusually. It's spelled the same exact way as the Hebrew word for head, which can also mean chief. And Uriah in Hebrew literally signifies the light of Yah, or God, right? Which is just another title for Mashiach. Essentially, Lucifer and Mashiach are both lights. Okay? This is why Uriah can be thought of as a shape-shifting occult name or symbol. Because, again, Lucifer and Mashiach are twin brothers. They are both very great lights. On level 6, Uriah represented the light that is Mashiach. On level 7, Uriah represents... my mistake. On level 6, Uriah represents the light that represents Lucifer. But here on level 7, Uriah represents the light that represents Mashiach. And here, because he is equated with being poor, right, which in Hebrew also signifies the head or chief, because he is the chief. He's the chief cornerstone and foundation of Ha Elohim. Okay, so you can see then how everything here is interconnected. And again, with this second example, it should now more than reinforce, the shape-shifting nature of not just the Holy Word, but also of Lucifer and Mashiach. Again, we're dealing with very, very highly spiritual, transcendent, mystical, esoteric, mysteries here. They're very, very high. This knowledge and wisdom that I have illuminated here in this video is very high and has been concealed in esoteric for thousands of years. In fact, some of the knowledge and wisdom that I have revealed in this video, you won't even find in some of our Kabbalistic books. So you're very privileged if you have found this channel in this video, to say the least. I will end by just making a few points on the Holy Word, which is that it can be thought of as a prism. And, when you direct your holy light to the Holy Word, right, that is what produces the interpretations. You can think of your interpretations as your holy light passing through this prism, and depending on how you direct your holy light to the Holy Word, which is a prism, it will yield different colors. And these different colors would represent the different interpretations of the underlying text. Again, the Holy Word is a living entity. It is a sharp double-edged sword, and it is shape-shifting. It's a shape-shifting entity, and it's very dangerous for all of these reasons, right? If you do not carefully use the Holy Word, if you misinterpret the Holy Word, that double-edged sword can turn on you and stab you, pierce you. It's very dangerous, and that is what we have seen for thousands of years, is that there have been certain Jews and many Christians that have misinterpreted the Holy Word, have not properly understood the Holy Word, and that double-edged sword has come upon them, whether they know it or they don't. Again, I just want to emphasize that this video is part of the extremely advanced Qabbalah, and what has been presented here is extraordinarily and extremely esoteric and of a mystical nature of the highest order. I hope that your eyes have seen and that your ears have heard. Shalom, Amen.